All right, so we about to get started, fellas. Thanks for joining me tonight. I know y'all had a lot of places to be, but you're here, so definitely appreciative of it. So we're gonna be talking about $40 Million Slave by William C. Rowe, and I thought it was a dope book. I thought it was very timely, and I think that was the reason why I picked it, just because what we're seeing with athletes right now, being in the forefront of social movements that we're having right now, and their voices are loud and being heard. I want to say being heard. I question some of the motives, with regards to like the NBA and the slogans on the back. But I wanted to read this book first because I like Bill Rowe, and I've been watching him on ESPN for a very long time. And then also, it's the idea of athletes being slaves. And I guess we can start there with what did you think of just the title of the book, $40 Million Slaves? Like, when you read it, what did it do to you? Or what type of feelings did it invoke, or thoughts rather? And it's up to whoever. This is an open question. You got to unmute yourself, Zane. Uh, Go ahead, Jamal.
So I think just with the title of the book, I mean, as I progressed in the book, it reminded me of a certain that Larry Johnson whole situation when he said that years ago, um, and I think we always look at how I want to say objectified athletes sometimes are. We look at how they operate, why they operate. It brought to mind the whole is Jordan for black people? What has he done? It brought to mind the different athletes that he thinks for their communities who been quote unquote allowed into certain arenas, into certain spaces. So I mean, just seeing this, and again at this time, because it was a book that I had not chose to read when it came out. Um,
Yeah.
but at this time, I think it brought a lot of intrigue, and that's why when I was reading it, then um, you know why I feel the way I feel about the book now, which again, like you're saying, it's a good book. It's a good book that sheds light on a lot of things that makes me rethink some of how I look at athletes and how they're objectified still to this day. So that's just a real quick what I felt about just even the title.
Yeah. Anybody else? What about you, Zane? Oh yeah. You sound a little bit off, Zane. I'm gonna mute you for a bit. Um, what about you, Carlton? What did you think about the title of the book?
Well, in reading it, the understanding I got was that the author was at a game. Maybe Larry Johnson just used the term. You heard a white boy in the audience saying, he's referring to a black athlete, you're a $40 million slave, and you know, I took that to mean it was probably some old peckerwood redneck whitey who was resentful over the fact that the brother's making all this cake. But as I'm reading the book and everything, a lot of this brings back memories of John Carlos and Tommy Smith back to the 1968, Olympics when I was a student in college at the time, and all of that Harry Edwards. It's like one thing, like none of this is new,
Yeah.
and it's kind of a shame that this battle, these different issues that the author Roden is raising, is like, damn, we ain't progressed beyond this.
Hmm.
You know
Yeah.
what I mean? So the title, I understand, but this is a good book. There's a lot of good information in this book. Some things that I knew, but he goes into detail. I don't think he really had to tell me all about the rambling Morgan game, quarter for quarter. That got kind of boring, and everything. But
And
once you get on the Negro League and things like that, there's a lot of gems in there.
yeah, yeah, and we're gonna get to that too, because I thought it was important that he brought that up, and it'll because it'll resonate when we talk about what's happening today with HBCUs and their inability to be viable. Is first it be viable in sports, but then to be viable as academic institutions. What about you, Ellsworth? What were your thoughts on the title?
I thought it was interesting because really, I know it said on about the athlete, but that could really be anybody, really, that $40 million slave. Uh, and I thought that with the new emergence of younger athletes like LeBron James and stuff, they're starting to speak out where ordinarily, if you look at the plantations, the NBA, most of the professional sports teams are plantation owners, and we're seeing that when Kaepernick came out and they kind of just shut him down, and all that talk, but they still never hired him. Okay, so I just looked at it. Yeah, when when you start getting that dollar, you're kind of owned by the slave master, which I believe is like the owners of the NFL. They own you. You're like property. It's another form of property. You just got $40 million. You still owned by that owner.
Yeah, yeah. We're gonna try you again, Zane. Let's hopefully your mic cool. Yes, it's still rough. Maybe try to can you unplug it? Maybe. Try. Are you on your phone? Try your phone. Try to use your phone to get in. So because we definitely want to hear your thoughts on it. I guess when I read it, when I saw the cover, because I've been seeing this book around for years. Like I said, I followed Bill Rowe, and he would be on and I think he talked about it. He would be on the sports reporters. It came on Sunday mornings, and I looked at it as brand like a highbrow sports talk, right, where you can really have meaningful dialogue past just the X's and O's and the scores that you see on Sports Center, but they really did a deep dive into sports. And we're gonna bring Al Latif in. And so when I read the title, I didn't know where it came from. I didn't know that was a Larry Johnson, that a fan had screamed that out to Larry Johnson. I didn't know Larry Johnson was as militant as he was, right? And reading that, I just thought he was he went from being
$40 million slave.
he went from being grandmama to being a New York Knick who it was corny, right? I remember him hitting the 4-point play. And so to see him in that light and know that the title of the book came from that, it was just like, oh wow, right? Like somebody actually had the balls to say that first off, right? And like Carlton said, we know who that probably came from, probably some little white kid or white adult that made this statement. And I forget which one of you brothers said, like, it is something that many of us feel, right? Many of us feel we not $40 million slaves, but we might be $100,000, $70,000, $40,000, $20,000, $5 slaves, right? To our employers, and we don't get the necessary respect that we deserve, right? Because we are human beings. And so you just came in, Al Latif, props to you. We was just talking about when you read the title, just what type of emotion did that invoke? Go ahead. My fault. I muted you.
No, I'm good. Damn. I think when I first got the book way back when, it was like the first question is how, right? Because when you put together the $40 million a slave, it's like, well, how does this marry up? So it was just like the intrigue of what is this going to be? And so, I remember when back then I was going into Barnes and Noble and Borders to buy the book. So I remember going in and reading the first chapter and just saying, damn, all right, this is what I need in my life right now. So it was the intrigue was really what brought me to it, like the intrigue of the title. It just really brought me to the book.
Okay. All right. Well, what about you, Zane? Hopefully your joint cool now. Perfect.
What? Oh, is this okay?
Yeah, you're fine.
I thought it was interesting that Ellsworth said that, or I can't see everybody's name, but the other brother said that it could be anybody. So it could be any, any industry. And I thought that was really important to how I understood, because I kept inserting myself in some of the conversation as an artist. You know what I mean?
Mm.
Not that I'm on that level, but just in terms of being caught up and being included. You know what I mean? And getting paid for being included. It's something, the way he breaks down the history of it and how we keep trying to break away from the sort of spell that capitalism and whiteness has on us. But every time they find a way to rope us back in, even if it's more money and more perceived fame. But I really was appreciative of the history of baseball and stuff, because I'm not a big sports fan. So all of that information was amazing, all the baseball history, and even the way he talked about the conveyor belt,
Yeah.
and just how that system is set up to keep you nullified. So he makes his analogies are perfect. Like he doesn't, that the title of the book is expressed in almost every analogy that he makes, or metaphor that he uses to make his point. I just thought I was enlightened and empowered by it. And it also sort of reinforced this idea that I know we have power. We have power if we would just step away. You know what I mean? But it's hard for us to step away from proving or participating in something that they set up.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I completely agree. I completely agree. Yeah, that conveyor belt analogy. We're gonna talk about that in a little bit. That was so profound. I think, and I started, I was reading it on my Kindle, so I was just highlighting. I didn't necessarily formulate questions, but I was more intrigued with some of the paragraphs, right? Because I thought they were profound, and they can definitely be discussed. So on page 3, it started. But today, when so many black athletes have little or no sense of who or what came before, there is no sense of mission, no sense of the athlete as part of a larger community, as a foot soldier in a larger struggle. And I thought that was so interesting. Again, going back to the reason why I wanted to get the book, because now where we are, and with athletes and social justice, we see everybody's kneeling. We see the slogans on the back of the jerseys. We see players speaking out on behalf of Breonna Taylor. They're at the marches. And when this book was written, and I believe it was written in around about like the early 2000s, right? This compare and contrast to now, we've done like a 180, right? So we've gone from the times of John Carlos and Tommy Smith, Muhammad Ali, and Jim Brown when he leaned into his blackness, not necessarily so much now. And going forward, and then we hit this down period, right, where athletes weren't really speaking up, or if they did, like Mahmoud Abdul Rauf or Craig Hodges, they were blackballed from the sport. And so to hear him say that, to see him write that in 2005, 2006, and now in 2020, where Jimmy Butler comes out in the game last night and he has no nameplate on the back of his jersey. He said, because I wouldn't be anything, right, if I wasn't in the NBA. I'll be just like everybody else. I thought it was just so profound. So just to get your thoughts on that, and how it appears to be this ebb and flow when it comes to social justice, and why we're on the peak part of it right now. And again, it's anybody can answer that.
I think in one way, you have to be, because we're indoctrinated to be docile, in our education, in our way, you have to have somebody in your ear, or have a network of people that keep you vigilant in being aggressive with whatever the cause of the day is. Not the cause of the day like it doesn't matter, but whatever we are fighting about, whatever we're trying to change, even if it's in a small way, we have to, it's hard. That's what I think I'm trying to say. That it's not easy to wake up every day and put on your black military uniform.
Mm.
And I think some guys just want to ride and forget that they're black. And I don't mean black like culturally. I mean black in terms of militancy, or in terms of a person who has to be revolutionary, a
Yeah.
person who has to be to fight every day, and that takes a toll. And I think it's easy to just you know play ball and have fun and sort of just try to get a bigger paycheck for yourself and do sort of cursory things when really the revolutionary brain, you know what I mean? And I speak for myself too. It's hard to risk something that you think you're risking. You know what I mean? Like risk your job or risk a paycheck or risk being ostracized. But the payoff, I think, is going to be so much bigger. And if you're not historically informed, like this book does, you can't even know that there's been attempts to do things and to open up your mind and try to do some of those things.
Yeah. Yeah. Anybody else want to talk about that quote from the book?
So I want to follow up what Zane was talking about when you posed that, and when you were talking, I wrote down Kyrie Irving, and you talked about being revolutionary, and you talked about now. I was one, and just even in this short time, it's like, yo, I really want to give Kyrie an apology, right? If
Word.
if 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 I really thought Kyrie was about that life, I don't know, right? Because like you said, the fact of the matter is we need a black basketball association. Like that's what Kyrie basically was saying. We need a black basketball association. Think what it's about 75% of the players in the NBA are black. Like, and imagining, can that break off? Can we really can that pop? Like if somebody who would be the brainchild? A lot of people would think maybe LeBron. I don't know if it's LeBron, but who would be the person? And then, again, going back, seeing what happened with the Negro League, right? And then seeing what happened. Now, I'm going to tell you something, and I didn't read sports forever. I ain't know they really did Jordan the way they did him. the way I was like, man, that's Jordan. But then, like you said, for 20 years, it's been like, all right, people making money doing this, doing that. But like, what if Jordan really would have become the owner?
Yeah.
Could we be one step closer? Like you said, being that black militant, could we be one step closer? We got the Big Brawler brand, the big three. Like, we got little attempts at it.
Yeah.
Could that really happen? So, when Zane was talking and based off the quote, I was like, man, I'm like, yo, I really want to apologize to him and wish that, like, who is this collective of thought, people who can think, that can make this real?
Mm-hmm.
Because we've had the attempts, and the book has painted this out, but it also painted to us how they've literally shut us out.
Yeah.
On purpose.
Yeah. Yeah. Anybody else?
Well, following up on what the brother was saying, I watched 2 games last night. I watched the Lakers. I'm a Lakers fan. I watched the Lakers and who was it they played? Damn, I can't remember.
Toronto,
the Raptors, right? And the Raptors spanked them. And then before that, I watched the game, and you talk about a national black basketball league or breaking off and all of that. You could already see that dude David Stern that used to be the commissioner, and his hand-picked dude he got in there now. You know what I mean? I don't want to mention ethnicity or something. Those things aren't done by happenstance.
Yeah.
Those things, but the point I'm making is this. They bringing all these players over from Europe. Already last night, one of the announcers was talking about how this guy Zongas, he's about 7'4", whatever, how he might be the MVP.
Mm-hmm.
And what I'm saying is, they bringing more white players into this, and there's a reason why they doing that. They talking about having games in Africa. They already done had a few over in Europe. They taking this thing out of quote unquote the ghetto, and they're gonna internationalize it. And when they internationalize it, a lot of people we know ain't gonna be making no money, or they're gonna be making less money. So it's another thing going on. Well, we need to get ahead of what's going on, ahead of the dynamic.
So I want to piggyback off that because that makes me ask the question, and we jumping ahead a little bit, right? Because isn't this what they were talking about with the jockey syndrome when they said that
Yeah,
with the black jockeys and how they were it going from the plantation, and then they really started making money as jockeys. They were dominating, and
right.
then they started moving the goalposts and start switching up things, right? To eventually, with the idea of getting them out of this. So what you're saying is it's along that same idea as to what's taking place in the
Hey,
NBA.
yeah, yeah, that's basically what I'm saying. I'm saying if you look at what's going on, I mean, they done already. I mean, look, they know that in terms of skills, they never going to get a group of white boys. You know what I mean? They know that look, we got this locked. We got this basketball thing locked as far as the skills playing the game. But in terms of the money, that's where they come in. You know what I mean? That's where they come in.
See, I think at the fact, and anybody else could feel free to chime in. I think the difficulty with that is, right, this is different than baseball. Like, baseball is an expensive sport to play, right? And
Right,
basketball is the poor man's game, honestly. I can't think of another game that might be as poor. Maybe soccer, right? Where, again, you could get any type of ball and play. You can do it in any type of weather. So for me, I don't necessarily see that happening, but I think they see the bigger picture when it comes to this idea of marketing, right? Because we recognize that they are capitalists, and that
right.
the goal is the bottom line, the bottom dollar. I'm surprised the Houston Rockets GM didn't get fired for talking about China, right? Because that cost them probably $1 billion. So I don't necessarily know if it's going to come out of it's not going to be played in the ghettos anymore, right?
No,
Like the baseballs and what have you. I think maybe we might see a little more. I think what they're fashioning themselves to do is like they had the NBA Africa, right? They're going to have leagues to take over for the FIBAs and what have you in the Europe, and so it'll be NBA Europe, like they did the NFL when it was NFL Europe, NBA Africa, NBA China, and
right,
so they could have their hands in all of the pots.
right.
So I want to get to this next point, and I think it's related to the last question. Go ahead, you
Real
about to say
quick,
something? Go ahead.
yeah. If you look at the league the last few years, though, there's been a shift in the type of players that have come into the league, right? The type of black players that have come into the league, where we don't necessarily see a lot of the really I'll say poor kids who are making it to the league right now. We're looking at a lot of kids who are coming from middle class backgrounds that are making it to the league these days. And so there's already been certain shifts in how the feeder system is created, right? If you're paying close attention to high school basketball and college basketball, you're seeing a lot of second generation players starting to make it into the highly into the ranks and into the league, right? So if you look back at the draft last year, you saw like the first 10 players they had like their fathers with them. That wasn't happening in years prior to that, right? We were always seeing mom at the draft night, right? And then we were hearing these hard luck stories, but we weren't hearing the hard luck stories as much as we've been hearing the last couple of years. So there's been a lot of shifts, and that's happened a lot through the AAU ball, the club ball, the Nike Eyeball League, and all that stuff. And where the trainers are coming in, so the kids are getting a lot of one-on-one training. So there's even a different type of preparation going into getting into college ball and the pros.
Yeah, you definitely not getting your street baller who was killing it like here in Philly. It's the public league. Like
Right.
rarely do you get public league basketball players to make it to the NBA. I'm trying to think of
A lot of
the
them. washing out when they get to the
Yeah, because once I think I want to say, I think even Rondé Hollis Jefferson, who played for the Raptors, I think he went to because he didn't go to Chester High. I think he went to like a prep high school. I'm thinking about maybe like Kyle Lowry when we coming from here, like going from Cardinal Doherty to Villanova, like that traditional path, right? Because like you said, AAU ball is taking over. You really don't have to play high school ball for real, for real. You know what I mean? You could just be on this circuit, and I think that's when we start talking about this idea of the conveyor belt, right? And like this meat market where you get all these teams in one environment, and the people are just looking at them. Who's good? These 3-day, 4-day tournaments that are taking place, as opposed to having to go to a high school. I don't know how many of y'all watched the Stephon Marbury Netflix joint, but that was amazing, right? Just to see his story and how he went from being blackballed in the NBA to going to China to being a legend. You know what I mean?
Right.
But like you said, we're not necessarily seeing that type of story nowadays, right? Because if you nice and you black, right, you gonna go live with another family for real. You know what I mean? And go to a good institution. So yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I want to put a psychology part of this as well. If you look at the process, and this is where it's very important about black coaches, because if you look at it, when a black kid leaves out of wherever he's from, he starts getting introduced to the white person, the white guy, the white coach, and he starts losing his the sense of collective of African American about helping the blacks out. He starts learning about the white guy that's controlling him from beginning to end. So he goes once he goes to high school to college, he see a white guy. There's not many black coaches now, especially in Division I. And then he goes to professional, let's say football, and now there's not many African American coaches, black coaches. You still see the white guy. So his mentality, that's where that slave thing is still there, because everybody who's the leadership who control him is all white. And so he started thinking that he's not thinking more about I gotta take care of my people or whatever, get out, or try to take a collective. He's more thinking about, I'm saying he could be these women too. He's more thinking about, I've been ever since I left high school, it's been a white guy, a white coach in every level, with a white manager, with a white owner. So that's where that slave mentality plantation goes, because really, he sees the value not in us, he sees the value in the white guy. Even the guys who gets his money and stuff. Most of the time it's just a Jewish guy, the agents. Yeah. Most of the time the agent's a Jewish guy. One or two of them may have a black guy, but most of them it's the Asian white guy. So everywhere in that value system, he sees white. So I'm just trying to still see that psychology of the slave mentality, of plantation mentality that starts as soon as he leaves high school.
Yeah, and I think when we talk about like this first chapter in general, right? He talks about ignorance of the past making it difficult for black athletes of the day to unite and confront the issues of the present, right? There was a ignorance that existed, especially during this time period and still exists. But I think they're more aware, like Jamel said with regards to Kyrie Irving, right? He's a flat earther, and if it was hard to kind of, take him serious, but here he is. Even if he doesn't necessarily have knowledge of the past, he recognizes what this moment means. So he's paying the salaries of WNBA players who sit out, right? Because he recognizes how important this moment is. Bill Rowe talked about how African Americans were so disconnected from the American dream that sports often seemed the only venue where the battle for self-respect could be vigorously waged. And we see that to this day. Like you still go in these cities and kids not outside playing basketball no more. They might not be playing basketball at all, but they still got hoop dreams, right? And I find it kind of weird. It's kind of ironic that they still have these dreams without actually being out here. But I think it goes to what it is that they see. So it might not be hoop dreams in basketball sense, but they see their favorite rapper go viral off of YouTube. So now they rapping on YouTube because they can do that right from the comfort of their own home. So it's still this idea of I'm trying to hit that home run, right? I'm trying to hit that home run to get out of my condition. But with that, it's just like maybe a hyper focused on getting out of the condition as opposed to which impacts how they view the condition and if they even see the condition at all. You know what I mean? If that makes sense. Try so I kept highlighting, man. That was the downside of the Kindle. So I did have this one question. So how could African American athletes now become the energy inside the movement, right? And this comes from what he talked about what took place after Martin Luther King's death, right? He said after that it was no longer asking whites for access or approval, but autonomy. We weren't no longer appealing for understanding from white society or allowing to be allowed into its castle. We will build castles of our own, build strategies and programs that gave us a voice and power, right? So how can these athletes today really become this energy inside this movement? I know you, Jamel, said, listen, we need our own, right? If we really going to make a difference. So what other thoughts did y'all have with regards to today?
Well, I don't want to come from a negative. One thing we can't do is like what Deshaun Jackson did about a month ago. Run his mouth. He needs to read this book. And he needs to read The Heritage, and he needs to read some books that Harry Edwards put out back in the 60s. That brother's lost. You know, what I said after I saw the way them people did him in, is like, Deshaun, just run your routes, catch the ball. That's what you do. You don't get involved in no politics. You know, because they done took that boy and had him go from synagogue to synagogue, apologize. He apologized to Lori, the team owner of the Eagles. And for all I know, they got him over in Austria right now with Auschwitz.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I mean, how you allow people to do you like that?
But I think you bring up the point. Like, who was that on, right? And I think that goes to the initial question about ignorance of the past, right? Like, who's there to tell him to say, Deshaun, you need to read. Stop just copy and pasting, right? I know it's Baldwin birthday today, right? And I've seen a lot of Baldwin quotes posted by people.
Mine is tomorrow.
And word, happy early birthday. What you gonna be, 79, 80?
72 plus is my 41st marriage anniversary.
Oh, congrats.
All rolled up. I feel like I'm 100. 41 years with that woman, and I'm 72. I'm 100, brother. 100. As Chris Rock would say, my homie from Brooklyn.
Yeah.
100.
Yeah.
100.
Well, happy.
Ahead, I'm sorry.
Happy early birthday. But again, I think that's where we start asking, who was around him throughout his entire life to say you need to first read in general, right? Or to have these types of conversations with, instead of going to get you got the book without the barcodes on the back. You know what I mean? Right, you quoting straight from it, and now you don't even feel confident in what you believe to back it up, right? And say, listen, the consequences are going to be the consequences, right? That's why we're more appreciative of a Colin Kaepernick because we know he's going to lean into what it is that he's saying, right? Because he's read about it, he's thought critically about it. He's just not posting it to get some type of response. So, reading books like this definitely helps with regards to that conversation.
That's the key.
Graduate of the University of California.
Connecting to those thought leaders of the past, but also those who are in the moment leading the movement, right? So, making sure that the players are getting both the history lesson and and guidance in what's going on now. It's so easy. Like, it's easy to access, like, Carlton said, Harry Edwards, Dr. Todd Boyd. Like, it's so easy to get access to them.
Yeah.
It's like they're like an email away.
Well, not Harry Edwards, because I emailed him and shit. You know what I mean? I know he a little up there in age, you know what I mean? But I need his handlers to get back with me. But go ahead.
It's everybody's an email away or a social media mention away, and if the players really, want to learn, and want to continue to follow through, somebody has to start putting into play. At some point, somebody needs to say, all right, we're going to have a summit, and get some players to, get these people together across leagues, across disciplines, and really have conversations so they can understand why it's not cool to put those tweets out like Deshaun Jackson did, or like Ice Cube doubled down on, and then his rebuttal to Kareem, basically calling him Judas, like that just wasn't cool at all.
Yeah.
Mm.
Wait, who called Kareem Judas?
Ice Cube.
That's what I'm
Stop.
saying.
That hanky head. I don't know.
Lord. Again, and that's the problem, right? Like this, and that's we've had these conversations in the groups that I've had in person, Uncle Bobby's, with this generational disconnect, right? Like, how could you even fix your face to say that, right? Even if Jim Brown been on some ish being with Trump, right? You still revere him. You might not, you might feel some type of way, but it's still like I couldn't feel comfortable in fixing my mouth to say anything disparaging about Jim Brown because of what he's meant. Now I can be critical of him, I could critique him, right? And the things, the misogyny and what have you. But to call somebody Judas, man, like that's nuts.
Yeah, that's
He
true.
didn't flat out call him Judas, but he said, you guys, 5 pieces of silver or whatever, make the reference.
Yeah.
Well, but in what context? Excuse me, Phil. Why was he calling Jabbar a Judas? Was he sold out or sold somebody out? I mean, what was he referring to?
Kareem wrote an article about how troubling it is for the anti-Semitism. Basically, Nick Cannon, Deshaun Jackson, Ice Cube, and more. And it was, I think it might have been in either the LA Times or the New York Times. And so Ice Cube, he went Ice Cube.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
Mm.
So, go ahead.
It kind of goes back to that, and I keep mentioning about the slave master, or whatever. And I think the reality is that the real slave master are those guys who own those teams. Because if you notice, from Deshaun Jackson and even Nick Cannon, they apologize immediately. These guys got money, okay? Yeah. They apologize within 24 hours. I am sorry. And that just tell you again where the power is. That, you make a statement like that, and all of a sudden Nick Cannon is no longer representing who he's representing. And he's worth like almost $800 million. So I'm just saying, if you look at, they know where the money is. I saw the thing with, well, I don't want to get too far away from the topic, but it's another thing that you gotta be careful, because who really owns that money, and you can find yourself out of a job real quick, regardless of, even though you have money.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, but why? The thing is why is that job so important? Like, I mean, it's hard for me to comment on it because I didn't hear what they said. I just heard all the reverb behind it. But if you come from Nick Cannon's in school at Howard University, I don't know whether if he quoted a book that didn't have a barcode or he quoted Francis Cress Welsing, but he could have an academic conversation. And if he had to leave those platforms, we need people who are ready to, if you have that much money, if you can't stand up for yourself when you have that much money, then that's like the crux of the problem. How can a guy who's making like, I don't know, $35,000 a year stand up to somebody, or even $80,000 a year? How can we expect him to stand up when somebody who has, is a millionaire can't stand up? If it was right for him to stand up, he should have stood up.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like Kaepernick, you got to take your hat off for him. He stood up. He understood the consequences. And you can't be a person of any worth if you're not ready to take the consequences. Like, you got to understand that your belief system is going to cause some ripples in the system, and that's worth it. At the end of the day, you have to know that that's worth it. If it was something that he said that really warranted a apology, I understand that. If it was something horrible, you know,
Yeah.
but if it was something that challenged history, you know what I mean? I don't know what he said. I watched him painfully for like 10 minutes have a conversation with a rabbi on his show, and it was painful.
Yeah.
It was like he wants to say what he thinks he believes, but he can't now because he's in this space of no. It's like, Nick, really? The gatekeepers are really gone. Your platform will probably expand if you leave all the networks. And if it doesn't expand, I would gather that you'd be okay, but it's something in us that is attached to having their approval. And it's
and that's exactly what I was about to get into, Zane. That was about to be my next point, because they talked about this in the book when it came to Moses Fleetwood Walker and
Uh-huh.
and Isaac Taylor, right? Where it was this idea that, you know, they wanted what the white people had, right? They wanted to be a part of this, and they got pushed out, and they resented the fact they couldn't become a part of this white fraternity, or like Paul Mooney calls it, like these boys got their nigga wake up call, right? Like Bill Cosby, Nick Cannon, Deshaun Jackson. Like, no, you know, Kanye said you still a nigga in a coupe, right? No matter how much wealth you attain. And so I know he talked about that in the book, right, where he talked about Moses Fleetwood Walker and Isaac Taylor, and how they did everything by the book, right? They really wanted to be a part of this system, and then it was their desire to be a part of this system that got them pushed out, right? Because they weren't a part of this old boys club that so many of us still desire to be a part of. I posted about, I forgot what it was. Well, it was one of my posts. I do so many of them, but it was about the idea, we've heard it before, about, you know, black men wanting to be like their white counterpart, right? Like there's such an innate desire to be like the white man in so many aspects, right? And so, you know, we see that with black folks. As soon as you say something, no, they're gonna put you right back down. They're gonna take it all from you. And so again, we go to that slave component, because we could look at Nick Cannon as being the same, right? So, and we can definitely speak on that, because I wasn't aware that it was another Negro baseball league, you know, prior to the one that we know about. Who knew that it was two, right? Who knew that it was two? And same thing with the jockeys. Like, who knew that was the thing to be during that time? You know what I'm saying? So, and you could speak.
and how much
Go ahead.
and how much fame they had, and how and you know, and how well they did. It's you know, it's the part of the way things work. You know, like you get built up, and then they find a way to tear it down. But once you see the playbook, it's like you would think at some point that, like, for instance, this might be totally off topic, but I don't think it is. Even though Father Divine is problematic, right?
Mm.
He was actually genius in terms of the way he bought real estate, the way he set up different industries. I mean, he was problematic, but the process of making things happen, he made all those things happen. He put all those people to work. And even though you could call it a cult, but if you look at the apparatus came from the right place, or the effect of the apparatus. You know what I mean? If Marcus Garvey and Father Divine could have combined, maybe Marcus Garvey would have been more successful as a businessman. And maybe that person would have been less cult-like in his figure in terms of the way we look at Father Divine. But you couldn't get property from those people because of the way he set it up. He understood the system. He played the system against, you know what I mean, against the system. He brought white people in to buy property. He made the whole thing look like he was erasing shit, but that was a strategy. What, Mr. Carlton?
No, Father Divine, I'm down with you. I'm down, and especially
Okay.
I'm down with, I never thought about that. Marcus Garvey and Father Divine. Yeah, that would have been a good hookup.
Yeah,
because he was. I mean, they had an economy, a black economy in place. Marcus Garvey wanted to have a black economy in place, but he could never get to the end of it. He
Right.
he had a lot of things, but he couldn't make it stick somehow. You know what I mean? If he could have made it stick, if like Father Divine did, Father Divine still got properties. I watched
That's
this
right.
documentary recently,
Right.
and he still, and those people still, like whatever
Father.
spell he got them people under, they are diehard. And
That's right.
unfortunately, it was a way of thinking that didn't involve, having any offspring. Because if they had offspring and those offspring sort of used that playbook to create black wealth, you know what I mean? And yes, they were sharing it with white people, but it was still black wealth.
Right.
They took
Right.
anyway. So
no,
No,
I
no,
think
what you saying is good.
when you talk, and I think that's a great point, and I think when we start talking about the merging of ideologies, when you reference that, we can look to the idea of integration, and I think that was brought up in the book, and that's why when we talk, when Carlton brought up in the very beginning about talking about Grambling versus Morgan State, when I read that and I say Grambling versus Morgan State and it's sold out, who would want to see that? Right. But
Yeah.
again, it's coming from the lens of 2020. It would have to be like some type of the classic that they have, Southern versus Grambling on Channel 10 when it gets shown, and I know that's a very big deal. Right. But you telling me that Morgan State and Grambling, and they had like the athletes of the athletes there, right? Though
Right.
these amazing black athletes who would go on to get drafted. It was just like, wow, who knew? Right? But then he gets into this conversation about integration when Alabama lost to USC. And it was like, the kid from USC, he was from Alabama and he ran all over him. He didn't understand the big deal about it. Right? And so his mom was just like, yo, I want to give him the opportunity to play against the best. And that's when Alabama was like, we got to get some Negroes on this team. Right?
Mhm.
And so what we saw was the plucking of the black kids instead of going to the Morgan States and the Gramblings, they going to the Alabamas, the USCs, the Michigan States. We see it now, right? And what he talked about was how the HBCU thought that they just had blackness in the bag and that was going to be enough, but in reality, it wasn't. Right? It wasn't, because what it caused them to do was they rested on their laurels and they lost. And I was listening to it was another review of the book, and it was just like HBCUs might have dug themselves in a hole they could never get out of, but because of everything that took place during that time. And so we definitely want to get your thoughts on that.
I definitely, I think, an HBCU conversation is always going to be huge. But I think the one important piece that came out of that was, I think at that time, the HBCU was for a certain type of black. It was regional. So the Southern blacks, that's all they knew, right? You got to one of those schools, that's where you went to. But
Right.
when USC played Alabama, here's somebody who moved out of the South, then to the West Coast, where things could have been a little bit different. And he was just playing football. He wasn't subject to, could not have been subject to the same Jim Crow that was in the South, the same type of situation, segregation that was in the South. He was at USC.
Yeah.
I mean, you know what I'm saying? So he was at USC. So we out here playing football. I'm on the same, but we're not riding two different buses. We're not flying on two different planes.
Right.
We're coming down here. We're staying in the same hotel. I didn't have to go stay in a hotel. So we're balling. And so I think when you talk about how the HBCU dug itself a hole, I mean, it might, but I think we have to look at, that it was a type of person that went to HBCUs. They were all in a certain place. You look at, there are no HBCUs in the North.
That's
You
right.
know,
What I mean,
Listen,
there's a few.
Lincoln,
yeah, oh yeah, yeah, yeah,
Cheney,
Lincoln, and that's
Yeah,
the first two
Cheney.
actually,
yeah.
Yeah,
yeah, the oldest two.
yeah.
But here it is, this guy coming from USC said we just hit a play ball and we about to beat them. We gonna do what we do,
It's
and then they
yeah, go
picked
ahead.
up on the system real quick. They picked up on the system real quick. Look at Alabama now.
Yeah, I think I think where I come from, I'm coming from with regards to it is like they did nothing really to attract the black athlete to come. They thought, yo, it's other black people here, that was going to be enough. Because it had been enough for so long. And so when we talk about upgrading facilities and these different places, like I've been to Cheney, I've been to Lincoln, I swear Cheney's still playing football from from being the first HBCU, right? And it's just like at one point, I mean, they're cash strapped now, so they have to do a lot of mergers and things like and partnerships. But it wasn't always like that, right? And so what were you doing during that time? So when Grambling first realized, Grambling's a little different, right? But even still, they got the upper echelon black athlete who couldn't necessarily go to that D1 type of school. But it was like, what are you doing to try and get them here, right? Are you opening up your pocketbook, right? Because
When you
again,
say get them here, Phil, here, where? What are you talking about?
when we're talking about get them to the school, right? To get them
To
to
HBCU?
to get them to the HBCU, and so
I got something to say when you finish.
and so again, it was that idea prior to they didn't have to because we talk about separate but equal. So they're going to these different schools, and you can have Bill Rowe as the third string on the team. Would he do that now? No, he'll probably go to a white university or a D2 white university and be a part of it now because it's that idea of blackness that doesn't necessarily exist, and that's why everybody is so hype about the guy McCord Maker going to Howard. He's a top prospect, but that's not going to do nothing to put a dent in it. You're going to need literally like a hundred of, like the whole top 100 to say, listen, we going to Negro universities. Because again, what we know what these white universities are doing, they are willing to risk it all, right? They're willing to risk it all for the black athlete, and HBCUs aren't necessarily willing to do that.
Right. Well, I went to graduate school at Wisconsin. This is the early 70s. Wisconsin is a Big Ten school. And I'm in graduate school, so I ain't got time for all this bullshit going, you know what I mean, at the undergraduate level. I had already been through that, and like it's a professional school, you're supposed to be serious. You ain't got, but one thing I noticed, the apartment building I lived in was about 3 blocks from Randall Stadium. Randall Stadium at that time sat something like 68,000 people. All right. Today is close. I think they remodeled it. Today is closer to like 80, 90,000. But the point I want to make is this. See, a black athlete would have to, almost from elementary school, somebody would have to grab them and start schooling them and giving them a certain mindset, because what it boils down to is this: what can you offer me and what could you offer? Them Big Ten schools, them SEC schools, the Alabamas, the LSUs, and places like that, they have big athletic programs, millions, multi-millions of dollars. And when you come there for the campus visit, it's like, wow. Under the table, they got alumni that's willing to give you a car. All that kind of stuff. So, a young brother, 18 years old, he goes out to USC, he goes to Ann Arbor, up to Michigan, he goes to Madison, and they say, you come in, this is what we're going to do for you. As opposed to, you got to really be committed to go to be a caliber ball player, a TO, a Prescott, that kind of people. What's the brother who used to throw for the Eagles?
Oh, McNabb.
He's retired now.
McNabb, yeah.
Yeah, McNabb. You gotta really, really, really be committed to say, I could go to Howard, or I could go to Grambling, or I could go to North Carolina A&T, but I'm gonna go to Jesse Jackson. Went to University of Illinois.
Mm.
He wanted to be the quarterback, and then now you play over here, so he wound up going to the Aggies
Okay.
after he had been at Illinois for about a year. But I'm just saying, it's a tough nut because it's almost like saying, do you want to go to the movies on Columbia Avenue or you want to come to Hollywood?
Yeah.
You know
Yeah.
what I mean?
Yeah.
And you got talent. And you say, damn, Hollywood. They say, we'll have you at the whatever little joint was down on Columbia Avenue back in the 40s and the 50s. Probably don't even exist anymore. That's what you up against, man.
Yeah. And that's what it's going to take. It's going to take,
That's what you up against.
it's not even it's not going to take even somebody of a McCord Maker status, right? Because he's only ranked like number 40. Like he's a 5-star recruit, but he's still like in the 50s, right? It's going to take somebody, a number 1 overall pick, who they going to, and that's the thing, they're not going to stay just 1 year, right? They're going to stay there. They're going to try to build some type of legacy. And when we know what, coming from poverty or just the idea of possibly attaining millions, right? And we look at the Kentuckys and the Dukes when we talk about basketball and
Right.
footballs, the Alabamas. It's going to take somebody sacrificing, right? It's probably sacrificing money, sacrificing millions in order to get others to truly follow their lead. Or it's going to take, oh man, I mean, again, the idea.
Organized.
Say it again.
You gotta have somebody who has that kind of foresight, who says, look, I need all y'all high school athletes, or like the Fab Five, right? If they had chose a black high school, like in the book, I mean a black college.
Yeah.
What kind of revolutionary spirit would they have to have had? You know what I mean? And I think I'm gonna throw this out there real quick. This y'all know this brother, this rapper named Akila?
Who?
Akila, Akila. He's from
Nah.
He's from London. He's from Great Britain.
Oh no, I definitely never heard of him.
Super educated brother. He went to a Pan-African school on Saturdays. If we understood like that was the kind of effort that we had to put into our kids, you know what I mean? Just to untwist this fascination with capitalism and money, and if we started to, like, you got to start young. Like, it's not going to happen when you're 18. That shit has to be in your head when you're like 5, 6, 7, 8.
Yeah.
Really?
Like, that you have other options.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And when he started talking about the school that his white mom sent him to, so that he would be, connected to his culture, I was like, damn, that was a blessing for him to fall up in that situation. And Jadena spoke about it too. He was like, when me and my boys left school, we would watch the Asian kids and the Jewish kids go to schools after school, and we were laughing, and they were going to get a different kind of indoctrination. Right. You know what I mean? And I use the word indoctrination, but it's almost a liberation from all the lies and mendacity that we have to figure out.
Right.
And one more personal note, and then I'm gonna shut up. Like, I remember I wasn't even a sports player, but I didn't want to go to a poor-looking school. And all my female cousins went out to Archbishop Carroll High School for boys. And I was like, that's where I'm going. I followed them out there. And I remember one of my white friends said to me, don't you want to go back to don't you want to visit Africa? I want to visit Ireland. And in my mind, that was such an insult, because that's something that they say to us all the time, go back to Africa. But I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt. He wasn't coming from that perspective at that moment.
Yeah.
But I was stuck. You know what I mean? I was stuck in feeling offended by him saying that. You know what I mean? Yeah. I evolved, thank God. But in that moment, at 18, at 16, whatever age I was trying to be wasn't completely whitewashed, but I was trying to be the peacemaker between the blacks and the whites at my school.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which is still part of a way of, valuing whiteness more than black.
And I think, in one last point, right, and it's not even just necessarily about the athletes. I talked about this before, how I see people, I was on LinkedIn, and it was like these brothers who went to Harvard. They graduated from like Harvard Law School, and there was so many of them. And everybody's like, "Oh, congrats, graduated from Harvard." I'm like, what if they would have graduated from Howard, right? Like, why not value Howard like you value Harvard, right? Because again, it's that valuing of whiteness and that valuing of what they deem to be reputable and acceptable and important, as opposed to our institutions that are very much credible, because it was within this past school year where the Howard debate team wrecked the Harvard debate team, right? And I think that's been the gold standard for the last few years, if memory serves right. So again, it's about valuing the Howards, and we always throw Howard out there because it's the well-known one, right? Honestly, it's the white, it's the white accepted HBCU. You know what I'm saying? And so when we start getting into the Cheneys and I'm trying to think of some obscure ones. I heard, Savannah States and Prairie Views and and Tuffin and you know what I mean, Tilton, something like that. It's Tilton, Tuskegee, all of these other ones.
Talladega.
Yeah, it's so many of them. It's hundreds of HBCUs. And I didn't know that until within the last few years, because I'm sending out my information to HBCUs to possibly speak there. And I'm like, damn, it's 120 of them, right? But again, we look at the Howards and the Hamptons, and we value them even more than we value the other HBCUs. We're going to get ready to wrap up soon.
I have a question,
go ahead.
Phil, for you. You mentioned the term, and I know you was relating hardship. And I know that hardship thing 20 years ago, whatever it was used in terms of the NBA, he's coming in on a hardship thing. He's leaving college, but he's not even going because of the hard. The whole idea was that the brother was supposed to be poor. And I looked at it as an insult. Ain't nobody. I mean, look, if you're saying low income, yeah, I could buy that. And there might have been a small percentage that really, they trying to build up the whole, didn't have no shoes, didn't know where their next meal was coming from. That was all bullshit. You don't even hear about hardship no more, because they knew it was bullshit. And after a while, the term that Zane likes to use, capitalism, the money makers, the Wall Street people said, you know what, fuck that. Let's just bring them in. Let's just change the rules. Let's bring them in. They don't want to go to college? Fine. We ain't got to come up with no excuse that it's a hardship, that the mother's scrubbing floors for white folks on the plantation and that whole shit. That wasn't it at all.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And it was really demeaning to us. You allow yourself to come from that kind of construct, so to speak.
Yeah.
So I own question.
In my book, whenever it comes out, you know what I mean, I talk about that idea of, it's always that draft, right? You always got to hear about the absentee father. You always got to, like, they got to paint the worst picture when it comes to the black athlete, which is their effort in saying, you should be grateful that you made it, right? And then that because they've already been told they should be grateful from high school to college and moving forward. That's a great point.
They do it in the dance world too, and so you think you can dance?
Yeah, because again, they're selling something, right? They're selling this. So you told me this, Zane, right? When I told you I was when I was writing that script for that short that I was trying to get in that contest, like, there has to be some type of conflict, right? It has to be a conflict, and the more extreme the conflict, and it's just, unfortunately for us, we have this same narrative, right? No matter who it is. But when you talk about the dance world, and you can relate to this next point that was brought up in the book. He talked about how black built assets leveraged on black culture and the legacy of the black experiences always seem to end up in white hands with no payback to the black people who supported the company. Why? And that reminds me of, like, I was disappointed in reading that Robert Johnson stuff, man. Again, I know about that he sold BET to Viacom, but when you sit and you read it and you feel it, right? It was just like, yo, like, you made your backs off, for some people say, the ills of the black community. You know what I mean? And now here you are selling it to these white folk who have no stake in it. And it's easy to say, all right, peace out to a Nick Cannon, right? Regardless whether he the reason MTV2 is still sustained. So just that, if y'all could speak to that idea of just the cultural appropriation, that's what we're talking about across all arenas.
I just feel like you have to start, like, my goal is just to, like, okay, so Philadelphia is, I admire Joe Myers Brown more than I admire any other person in the dating world, because it would have been very easy for her to allow funders to co-opt the company and create a big brand. But because she stood in her truth and fought back, the company may have not become an Alvin Ailey, which is a big brand, and not that I look down on what Alvin Ailey did strategically, you know what I mean? But all the white money that went into that organization and to build that brand controls a lot of what happens in that company. If you have a person who understands the consequences of their truth, it's very hard for it to be appropriated. You know what I mean? And I use a company as it being appropriated. I mean, culturally, if you don't have your own institution, if you don't have a black basketball league, a black basketball association, if you don't have, if you don't have Jay-Z and them, really owning stuff and really guiding people, then we're always going to be fighting cultural appropriation. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think appropriation is a complex situation in terms, you got to talk about commodification. You know what I mean? Because when it's co-opted, modified, that's the problem. You know what I mean? Because we share cultural exchange all the time.
Yeah.
But black people are the ones whose stuff gets co-opted, commodified, and then the history gets erased. So how do we avoid that? You got to control your own information. You got to disseminate history. You got to not forget. You got to not be lulled into something. You got to keep having conversations about, what's the brother's name? Ruby, what was his name? The first baseball brother.
Jackie Robinson or Fleetwood Walker? Who's really Moses Fleetwood Walker.
No, not him. The first dude, the one before Fleetwood, with the middle name Ruby.
Oh, you talking about the guy? You talking about Rube?
Yeah, Rube Foster. Yeah, shout out to Drew.
Right,
Rube Foster.
Yeah.
Yeah, how many of Tyler Perry? As much as people want to look down on his empire, that's what you got to do. You got to have ownership like that. And fuck it, he fucked them all the time. He was like, fuck the fact that y'all think that me dressing up in a dress. I'm talking to my people. I'm talking directly to my people. And that can work. You don't always have to look at ourselves through the lens of whiteness. Like, I know it's hard, but we can't keep giving value. At some point, we got to follow a big ass sign that's out there. And I think Tyler Perry is one of the biggest signs that the black community has had of a different way.
Anybody else? I thought you was about to say something, Jamel.
I think, and even just hearing what Zane is saying, will there be a day where we don't want to buy into capitalism? I mean, the fact of the matter is, like you described, one company who's staying more true to self versus another company that white money has funneled in, and that means now white people have some sort of control, some say so in how things operate and how things move and shape. You know, whether it's sports, whether it's academia, whether it's um, television and movies. I mean, if we're, I think if we value sense of self more versus the $1 billion industry, I don't know if that's going to be a day. I mean, at this standpoint, I think everybody, wants, wants to make money. I mean, look at, if we talk about buy black and we do all these things, which is a good thing.
Yeah.
But now are we wanting people to buy black so we can have money like Nike? So we can have money like Ralph Lauren? I mean, I don't know. I just, and you're like you said, it's the blueprint is right there. Again, going back, I loved how, with the original Negro League, he was like, nah, when y'all try to, we know it's going to be integration, but you're going to get this whole team, and we're going to beat every team you got.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like, so my thing is now, we know we can make better television, so we're going to keep on this independent thing. You know what I mean? Independent, all of these comedians and everything on YouTube and Facebook now, who are making money, don't try to get signed by ABC. Don't try to get signed. Just keep doing this. And let's see if Tyler picks somebody up. That's going to be the test.
And that's,
is Tyler going to pick somebody up?
but I think that's the thing though, man. We look at the young queen. What is her name? Well, I don't want to call her queen because I think she identifies as they. Michaela Cole, right? Who she did Chewing Gum on Netflix, and they wanted to buy her latest film. That's a series that's on I believe it's either HBO or I think it's HBO right now, and she was like, nah, nah, like she said, yo, I need a percentage, right? I need a percentage of it, and Netflix was saying no. Right, like you giving up all the rights. It shows she held out, but what did she hold out for? Right, she held out for some ownership, but she held out for ownership being granted to her from white folks. So again, it's just like this entire system. And who really wants to sit and wait around for the Tylers to find you when you got so many of these other white avenues that exist? That's why when I initially thought what Byron Allen was doing was so powerful, right? Before he ended up agreeing to a deal with Comcast, it was just like, yo, you really about black folk, right? And you trying to make sure we're in the forefront. And then you strike this deal with Comcast, and it's just like, nah, you're not out here, even though you got your own channels, right? You still assimilating into the umbrella and the empire that is Comcast. But again, who's going to sit out and wait for that, right? We've seen it in the music industry. I think that's the one area where we saw it where, they like, no, I'm not signing this label. Master P, I don't know how many people watched the Master P series that's on BET for the next 3 weeks or so, but he went to Priority, and they was like, all right, yeah, they had the contract, and he was giving up everything, right? And it talking about his name and naming rights and all of that. And that was akin to, what's that big astrologer? I don't know if y'all watched it on Netflix. Big Mexican, Puerto Rican astrologer. Name escapes me. He died not too long ago. But he ended up losing everything. He couldn't even use his own name. And Master P was like, nah, I want 85-15, right? 85-15, I want a distribution deal. Point blank, I'm not taking nothing else, right? And so, again, but you got to have something to show that you're able to do that, right? You got to have this certain amount of followers on social media. You got to have, because again, if you just starting out, why would they take a chance on you? You know what I mean? And so that's why we do need more of our black millionaires and billionaires to really start to, when we talk about program, when we talk about just these different avenues, why we need them to really show up like a Tyler Perry. You know what I mean? If we're ever going to crack this glass ceiling that exists.
And to Jamal's point, I haven't read this book yet, but maybe this might be an interesting next book for us to read. It's about the black co-ops that existed in Philadelphia. and that's community wealth building. Like, you bring everybody in so that everybody is making money when you have a co-op business model. And Philadelphia had apparently the largest community of Black-owned co-ops in the country at one point. And I'm curious to read the book. Somebody told me about it.
What's the name
And
of
I
it?
think we have histories like that get forgotten about because it empowers us. It's not by mistake, you know. It's not by mistake.
What's the name of the book?
I gotta
Come on, Zay. You can't come with the come saying we we gotta read this book. You ain't even got the book, black brother. You know what I mean? That's a part of the plan. You know what I mean?
I know. My bad. I'm gonna find it and I'll text it out.
Okay.
Please.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great point. If we ever talking about, but again, it's the sacrifice. What generation is willing to sacrifice? Because it can't just be a one-off. It can't just be one person. It has to be everybody willing to sacrifice something.
But I think, like you said earlier, Phil, when you look at how the conveyor belt, has shifted, like that story about Kellen Winslow Jr. and his father,
Man.
and you talked about how in the NBA draft this past year, it wasn't, the single mom with the son. It was, my dad played in NBA, and now, like you said, they have other options, right? Like, the NBA isn't their way out of anything. And I think Kellen Winslow, that story showed that with the proper education and understanding how this thing operates, we can make those changes, and it could be in any industry.
Yeah.
Right. And it won't it doesn't need us to have the sacrifice that I think that we're looking at. It doesn't have to be as large because you're dealing with people now who have options, who this is not the only way. It's not the way out. I'm not putting food on my mother's table. I don't have to buy her a house, buy her a car. But my mom and dad already got that.
Yeah. Right.
I'm just playing ball. I'm doing this because this is something I enjoy and I'm good at. And because my dad knew the system, I watched it. And I see some of my peers with their children, even me with my children, one-on-one basketball academies and basketball camps. And like, I put it this way, probably the top college talent isn't even the top football talent, right? It's just those who've had the access to get to these camps, the top 50, Under Armour top 50. They ain't the top 50 ones in the country. They're the top 50 who were able to get to that competition weekend, and now I'm ranked.
Yeah.
And these are the systems that get me to where I want to go. This is all Alabama's looking at. Nobody's going to sit in the stands at high school football games anymore. Like you said, nobody's going to the high school basketball game. The gyms are not getting sold out. Now for an AAU tournament, they'll get sold out, right? So I think that you have these people with options now that will lessen that sacrifice that will need to be made. And I think that piece with Kellen Winslow and his dad, like, you ain't going there because he knows what he's supposed to do. Like, wait a minute, the coach supposed to do this. So you just exit him off the list for that? Wow.
Yeah.
I was just saying that there's not, each sports league is different, right? You got the really racist NHL, and then you got and they're different. So like, it looks like the NBA, the blacks have more of a control of their life and wealth. And then with the NFL, I was looking at it with Dak Prescott, right? Everybody know he should got paid, right? And that's been a hard road for a black quarterback to make a lot of money than a white quarterback that maybe did half what a black quarterback does. So, but then Patrick Mahomes, he got paid. But I just think each league is a different area when it comes to black and black ownership and black, liberation. I think the NBA is more liberated as a black than a black man in baseball, where there's not as many of them and stuff and like that. So I just think each league is different when it comes to the black liberation and that kind of stuff as well.
Yeah, I think, I don't, I push back a little against that. I think it's a lot about optics, right? Because I don't even, when I look at the NBA now, I really don't look at them as any different than the NFL, right? Yes, the players have a little bit more of a voice because they have guaranteed contracts, right? So it's kind of difficult if you sign somebody for 5 years, 100 something, 82. I mean, now they're getting 40 mil a year, right? Yeah, and plus they don't wear helmets, which plays a big part. They recognize that the athletes are the brand, right? They are the brand. When we talk about the NFL, no, it's more of the experience, right? It's the teams. Even though we got the Patrick Mahomes who are the stars, right, of the league, it's still hidden behind the helmet. But when I look at the NBA, and I've been critical of how they've handled this situation with regards to social justice. Like, you look at these slogans on the back of these jerseys, and LeBron was like, "Oh, nah, I'm cool on this. I thought y'all was really gonna be about something." I think he recognized that this is for show, right? Yeah, they could have drawn a harder line in the sand with the kneeling. But again, we didn't see people kneeling in the NBA because they had it on the books already. You cannot kneel during the anthem, right? And that's something that people didn't know. And so we see what happens with the racist owners. They got him out, Donald Sterling. But I don't necessarily think that they're any less racist. I think they're a little more. I think the white supremacy aspect is just built into the infrastructure of these organizations, right? Now you got your individuals like your Adam Silvers who understands, but they're still in control of this white supremacist, capitalistic, patriarchal structure that exists. You know what I'm saying? So that's why Mike Jordan still is the only black owner. And we see what it had to take for him to get there. We see black GMs here and there, right? But you got to be extraordinary. Look at Mark Jackson. He still hasn't had a coaching job how long it's been? Almost 8-9 years. But Tom Thibodeau getting hired on his third job to coach the Knicks. You know what I'm saying? And so we don't get the opportunity to be retreads in this environment, which is no different than in the NFL. So again, optically speaking, I think it looks better, but I think it all operates from this white supremacist, patriarchal capitalistic structure, like Bell Hooks is saying. I don't know if Zane been having his ear to the streets, but but Bell Hooks been getting killed within the last 24 to 48 hours by Black Twitter, because on something she said she was a landlord, right? She said she was a landlord, and Lord, that pretty much killed everything she said, according to people, right? Because it's like, you speak out about capitalism and all of this, but here you are a landlord. You know what I'm saying?
What?
So
What's that got to do with anything?
you got to Google it. You got to
Okay.
Google it and see Bell
Because
Hooks
she
landlord.
used the term landlord?
No, that she is actually a landlord. Like she talking about property ownership. You know,
She's not supposed to own property? What the fuck is wrong with Black Twitter?
Again, you got to delve deeper into it. You know what I'm saying? You got to delve deeper into it.
Okay.
As we're gonna get ready to get out of here, because I know the 8:30 game about to come on. So I guess the final question. I'm trying to see what other notes I have. I got a whole lot more. I guess James Weldon Johnson. I guess just what are your final thoughts and final takeaways from the book before we get out of here, and how it'll impact you moving forward?
I know I'm more determined to try to, create my side hustles and make sure my businesses are thinking about growing community businesses. The projects that I have, make sure they're thinking in terms of how to grow community wealth and maintain ownership.
Mm.
That's my takeaway. I mean, plus all the history. Like I love reading about history.
Okay.
And the context, because everything is recontextualizing what we sort of feel and know, and you look at it through different lenses and how strategic that shit is.
Yeah. Yeah. Anybody else? Ellsworth, Jamel. Oh, go ahead, Jamel. I see.
Yeah, I think again, the history was just amazing. That the early part of that it was really amazing. But I think even within this book, I've read a couple other books while we were reading this, and it just opened my eyes to just how systematic things are. And like I said, it was good that you brought up the Dak piece, and it was interesting reading the book that, you know, Dak is fighting for 40 million, right? We didn't touch into, you know, everybody wants Jerry Jones to say something, right? And I'm like, I'm good with Jerry not saying anything, honestly. I mean, if he ain't got nothing to say, why force yourself to say anything?
Yeah, be who
Right?
you are. Lean into who
I
you
mean,
are. Exactly.
be who you are. Like, look, I'm out here coaching the Cowboys, and that's it. I mean, owning the Cowboys. Let's get this season going. I'm cool. But I just think, you know, looking at how systematic things are, and really keeping my eye open for systems, like the brother said earlier, this could be any industry, and checking myself in the industry I'm in, you know, in academia.
Yeah.
You know, how does this work here? And, you know, we talk about the contracts. If we look at slavery, the slave didn't get the opportunity to sign a contract. These days, we get an opportunity to sign the contract. So now, you know, what contracts am I willing to sign? You know, how am I going to empower myself within the contracts? What are the things, like you said, those lines in the sand that I'm just not going to let folks cross? And what am I willing, to the point, what am I willing to sacrifice?
Yeah.
We talked about Colin a little bit earlier, and I from the jump, right? There's two sides to the Colin Kaepernick story to me. One is that he was done, right? I mean, football, everybody wants him to get back in the league. Now he's better, you know, than many other backups in the league. You know, I'm gonna give him that. But the fact of the matter is, his run was done. But, you know, he made a stance, right? And I know if I make a stance at my place of employment, and if it costs me my job, maybe I'm not going to be like Nick Cannon and them. I'm not going to recant. I'm not going to go back.
Yeah.
But there might be a situation, you know, so you know, it's just making me more cognizant of the system of oppression, the systematic erasing of people. You know, I think that's, you know, and how they use and how they change the rules. You know, again, just the last point of the book, you know, with the fighting, all I knew about was Jack Johnson, but the brother before, we're going to make a fight 30, 40 rounds.
Yeah.
Man, I'm fighting for 30, 40 rounds of a fight. Y'all know I won. And I finally got tired.
Tom Molyneux.
Yeah,
you know, and I finally got tired and lost. And now my legacy is on this, you know. So, you know, it's just being more cognizant about it. I think this book has opened up a lot of things about systematic oppression and how they run the game.
Word. What about you, Carlton?
I think, you know, when you read stuff like this, you always kind of, and especially being my age, you look back and you say, like Harry Edwards, you say, well, damn, why are we going through this now when they did that then? You know, but we really have to really get a hold on this thing.
Yeah.
You know, like Rube Foster did. And you really have to control, you know, your own self and your own, and that's the only way we're going to break this. You know, it may take a long time, but I mean, look at your Bob. Could you, how did he go from being as great as he is to how he's basically rapping?
Yeah.
You know, so I'm just saying, you know, I'm all for, you know, us getting together, combining, hooking up our resources, but it's rough, man.
Yeah.
It's rough.
Yeah. How about you, Ellsworth?
I think what you said earlier, I think it was very important how that we're the 180. I think that's because I'm more interested in tomorrow than I am of yesterday. And it's like somebody was saying now, you know, today's people, they want to plant the seed and eat the fruit at the same time. And it just don't work that way. And what are we doing? So in 180, how did we get from where it was when he wrote the book the first time to how we are today? Because I see a difference in how the athletes come out more and all other kind of stuff. So I'm curious, and I want to see now, is that another investment of the seed up for the future? So I'm more curious about what's next now. Now that we got a different, like Jamal was saying about now, most of the athletes, a lot of the athletes, they're second, third generation, so they're smarter. You know, they're a little more educated. And how is that going to? And then with these guys like Patrick Mahomes, those guys getting for the big contracts and that kind of stuff. I'm not seeing much progress as far as coaches. I'm not seeing much progress when it comes to the general managers as far as African Americans. But I am seeing more progress when it comes to the athletes. So I just curious to see what's going to happen next. You know, the 180. What happens with the 180?
Yeah. I guess for me is, just this idea of just standing on something. You know what I mean? Standing on something. I'm reminded of, they talked about Kurt Flood in the book and how he sat out the 1970 season due to the idea of free agency because where did they trade him to? Was it the Phillies? It might have been the Phillies they traded him to, and they were just using them like cattle, right? Just getting rid of them. They're expendable, and they had no say so, and so he sat out. And it's just that idea of, listen, man, lean into your truth, right? Lean into your truth, and that's what he did. He turned down X amount of thousands of dollars during that time period for the betterment of the people. It's funny. I was, his son had popped up on Twitter out of nowhere, and his son was in the Kurt Flood Jr. was in an argument. But it wasn't even an argument. This reporter was trying to denounce what his father did, right? Like, your father really didn't do anything. It was actually the white folk that came after it. And I was like, mind you, I had just finished reading a book, and I'm just looking like, yo, this is 2020, right? And this is what's happening still. And we know what's happening, right? But it's just like just being able to put that two and two together. Because any other day, I might have just kept going past it. Right, but then when you really read, and I'm sure it's a book out there that really goes into depth of Kurt Flood's story. But again, man, I think it's just those principles and those foundations and being unwavering in whatever you desire, whatever your truth is. And I know I did that with Dell State during my interview, where I didn't feel comfortable asking the questions. Right, about, well, what does this mean with regards to blackness? How is you as a white department chair, how do you feel you're capable of leading this department at a HBCU, right? And the decision was going to be the decision. And if it wasn't a decision that I could really, that really resonated with me, I was prepared to leave it on the table, even if it was something that I've been wanting for a long time. Right, so really just the idea of leaning into truth. Yo, man, I appreciate y'all, man. Hopefully y'all thought this was meaningful conversation. I definitely appreciate.
It was great.
I appreciate y'all, brothers, coming through to have this discussion. I think for the next book is going to be. It's actually a friend of mine. I want to give her a play, and it's a dope book. It'll give me a reason to finish reading it. But it's really dope book, and I think it goes along the line of what we were talking about, Zane. We talked about cultural appropriation, and and they're taking it and doing what they want with it. And so the book is White Negroes. When cornrows were in vogue and other thoughts on cultural appropriation. So her name is Lauren Michelle Jackson. She's a professor at University of Chicago. So hopefully, I'll be able to get her to come through and answer questions. Like, I read the first chapter of it, and it was, again, man, it was live. It was a dope book. I think we
all the way live.
Yeah, once Carlton starts singing, it's time to roll.
That's
but
for sure.
but I'm gonna send that out tomorrow. I'm gonna send that out, and hopefully y'all can participate in that.
All right.
Good money.
All right, I appreciate y'all.
Peace,
Take
brother.
care, Phil.
All right,
Stay
peace.
well.
No doubt.
Okay, Zizane. Take care.